The journey through deep space was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. For 8 months, Task Force Liberator traveled through the darkness between stars, moving further from Earth than any human had ever gone. At first, the mood was good. The crews were excited about their historic mission. They trained every day, preparing for the battle ahead. But as weeks turned to months, the endless black space began to affect everyone. Captain Seok Jin was the first to notice the problems. His destroyer, the Resilience, carried a crew of young officers who had never been away from home for so long. They started asking difficult questions. "Why are we risking our lives for aliens we've never met?" asked his second officer during a crew meeting. "What if we die out here and nobody even remembers why?" "Because it's the right thing to do, Captain," Seok Jin replied, but he could see doubt in his crew's eyes. The doubt spread to other ships. People began to worry about their families back home. They wondered if Earth was safe while its best warships were millions of miles away. Some crew members requested transfers back to Earth. Others simply became quiet and withdrawn. Vice Admiral Hai Wan had to deal with the worst crisis. A group of officers on 3 different ships sent a formal complaint to Fleet Command. They wanted to turn around and go home. "We signed up to defend Earth and human colonies," their message said. "We didn't agree to fight in alien wars that have nothing to do with us." Admiral Hai Wan called a video conference with all ship commanders. 200 faces appeared on screens throughout the fleet. "I know this is hard," she said. "We've been traveling for 4 months and we still have 4 more to go. Everyone is tired and homesick, but we need to remember why we're here." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "Somewhere ahead of us, an entire species is fighting for survival. They sent a message asking for help and we said yes. If we turn back now, we become the kind of people who break their promises when things get difficult." Most of the ship commanders agreed with her, but the complaints continued. Captain Seok Jin had to arrest 2 officers who tried to sabotage his ship's engines. Other captains reported similar problems. The situation improved when Intelligence Officer Dong Min made an important discovery. He had been monitoring Vorthak communications throughout the journey, slowly learning their language and understanding their military structure. "I've identified their commander," he announced during a fleet briefing. "War Commander Thekvar. He's conquered 17 worlds in the past 50 years. The Vorthak consider him their greatest military leader." "What can you tell us about his tactics?" asked Fleet Admiral Kyung-hee. "He's ruthless and efficient," Dong Min replied. "He always demands complete surrender before attacking. If the enemy refuses, he destroys everything, military and civilian targets alike. He believes fear is the best weapon." This information helped the crew understand what they were fighting against. The Vorthak were not just another military force. They were destroyers of civilizations. The knowledge strengthened the resolve of most crew members. Dr. So Young continued her research into Corvani biology. Using the information from their messages, she developed new medical procedures and medicines. Her work was important because human medics would need to treat wounded Corvani after the battle. "Their healing process is fascinating," she explained to her medical team. "They can regenerate damaged tissue by connecting to crystal formations. If we can provide them with the right crystals, they can recover from injuries that would kill a human." "What about their psychology?" asked Dr. Min Kyu, the fleet's counselor. "How do we help people who have watched their entire civilization being destroyed?" "That's harder," Dr. So Young admitted. "But the Corvani seem to find strength in community. As long as some of them survive together, they can rebuild their culture." The halfway point of the journey brought both good and bad news. The good news came from Engineer Gil Nam. His experimental weapons had passed all their tests. The plasma torpedoes could penetrate Vorthak shields. The particle beam weapons could disable enemy ships without destroying them completely. The bad news came from the navigation department. Long-range sensors were detecting massive energy signatures in the Corvani system. The Vorthak fleet was larger than anyone had expected. "How many ships?" Fleet Admiral Kyung-hee asked. "At least 300, replied the sensor officer. "Maybe more." This news created a new wave of worry throughout the fleet. Task Force Liberator had 200 ships. They would be outnumbered 3-2 fighting an enemy on their home ground. But Admiral Kyung-hee refused to let her people give up hope. Numbers aren't everything, she reminded her officers. David beat Goliath with one stone. We have something. The Vorthak don't expect. The element of surprise. During the 7th month of the journey, communications with Earth became impossible. They were too far away for real-time messages. The fleet was truly alone in space, completely dependent on their own resources and judgment. This isolation brought the crews closer together. People who had been complaining about the mission began to focus on supporting their shipmates. Everyone understood that they only had each other to rely on. Commander Nari used this time to perfect her fighter tactics. Her pilots practiced combat maneuvers every day in the ship's simulators. They learned to work together as a coordinated force. The Vorthak have never fought human fighters before, she told her squadron leaders. They don't know how fast we are, or how unpredictably we can move. That's our advantage. Colonel In Hai continued training her Marines for ground combat. They practiced fighting in low gravity and different atmospheric conditions. They learned to use Corvani crystal formations for cover and concealment. Remember, she told her soldiers, we're not invaders, we're liberators. The Corvani are our allies. Protect them, and they'll help us win. As the 8th month began, the fleet received its last message from Corvani space. The transmission was very weak and filled with static, but Hana Kim managed to clean it up enough to understand. Human fleet, the voice said. We know you are close. Most of our people are gone now, but some still fight in the deep caves. The Vorthak grow careless, they think they have won. Come quickly. We cannot hold much longer. The message ended with coordinates, the location of the last Corvani stronghold. How long until we arrive? Fleet Admiral Kyung-hee asked. 72 hours, came the reply. 3 days. After 8 months of travel, they were finally approaching their destination. The crew of every ship began final preparations for battle. Weapons were loaded and tested one last time. Medical bays were prepared for casualties. Communication systems were tuned to coordinate the attack, but first they had to see what they were facing. Long-range sensors began to paint a picture of the Corvani system as the fleet approached. The once beautiful crystal world was scarred and broken. Massive mining operations covered its surface. The Vorthak had been busy. Vorthak fleet composition, reported the tactical officer. 18 heavy battleships, 47 cruisers, 93 destroyers, and approximately 200 smaller vessels. Total, 358 ships. The human fleet was outnumbered almost 2 to 1. What about defensive positions? Admiral Kyung-hee asked. The Vorthak have orbital weapons platforms around the planet, energy shields protecting their mining operations, and they have ground forces guarding the crystal extraction sites. It looked impossible. How could 200 human ships defeat a force almost twice their size, protected by planetary defenses fighting in their own territory? But Admiral Kyung-hee had been thinking about this problem for 8 months. She had a plan. All ship commanders prepare for final briefing, she announced. We're going to show these Vorthak what happens when they threaten innocent people. As Task Force Liberator dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Corvani system, every human in the fleet knew they were about to make history. They were the first humans to fight an interstellar war. They were outnumbered and far from home, but they had something the Vorthak didn't understand. They were fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, and that made them more dangerous than any enemy the Vorthak had ever faced. The battle for Corvani space was about to begin. The Mars shipyards had never seen so much activity. Ships that had been scattered across human space for years were now gathering in one place. The massive orbital construction platforms worked day and night, preparing vessels for the longest military mission in human history. Fleet Admiral Kyung-hee stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. Through the massive windows, she could see hundreds of warships taking their positions in formation. Destroyers moved between the larger vessels like fish swimming around whales. Heavy cruisers powered up their weapon systems for final testing. At the center of it all, the great dreadnoughts waited like sleeping giants. Status report, she called to her officers. 200 ships ready for departure, came the reply. All weapons loaded, all crews at full strength. Admiral Kyung-hee nodded. She had been chosen to lead this mission because she was the best tactical commander in the human fleet. but even she felt nervous about what they were about to attempt. "Captain." Ho-Li approached her. His ship, the Storm's Edge, would lead the first attack wave when they reached Corvani space. "The men are asking questions," he said quietly. "They want to know what we'll find when we get there." "The same thing I want to know," Admiral Kyung-hee replied. "But we'll deal with whatever we find." On the other side of the bridge, Commander Na-Ri was reviewing fighter deployment plans. She would be commanding the carrier group that would launch humanity's most advanced fighters against the Vorthak. Her pilots were young and eager, but they had never fought anyone more dangerous than pirates and smugglers. "How are your people holding up?" Captain Ho-Li asked her. "They're scared," she admitted. "But they're also excited. Most of them joined the military hoping they'd get to explore new worlds. Now they're going to help save one." In the engineering sections of the fleet, Gil-nam worked frantically to prepare new weapons. He was the head of weapons development, and he had been given access to every experimental technology humanity had developed. Plasma torpedoes that could punch through heavy armor, particle beams that could disable enemy ships without destroying them, force field generators that might protect human ships from Vorthak energy weapons. "Will they work?" asked his assistant, So-Ra. "I hope so," Gil-nam replied, checking his calculations for the 100th time. "We're going to find out soon." Enough! While the military prepared for war, other people worked on different aspects of the mission. Diplomat Young Su spent his days trying to establish better communication with the Corvani. The aliens had not sent any messages for weeks, but he kept trying to reach them. Finally, a weak signal came through. The voice was different from the earlier messages, older and more tired. "Human ships," the voice said in heavily accented English. "We know you are coming. We have been watching your fleet movements. We are surprised. No species has ever traveled so far to help strangers." Young Su leaned into his microphone. "We're on our way. Can you tell us about Vorthak positions?" "Most of our people are dead or captured," the Corvani replied. "But some of us still hide in the deep caves. The Vorthak think they have won, so they are not watching the skies carefully. But beware, they have many ships and their weapons are powerful." The transmission cut out, but Young Su had learned something important. The Corvani were still alive and they were providing intelligence about their enemies. Dr. So-Young was working on a different problem. As the fleet's chief medical officer, she needed to be ready to treat wounded Corvani as well as humans. The aliens' crystal-based biology was completely different from human anatomy. She had to invent entirely new medical procedures. "Their wounds heal differently than ours," she explained to her medical team. "If we can keep them stable, their bodies will repair themselves. But we need to understand their chemistry first." Colonel In-hai had perhaps the most difficult job of all. She was training the first human soldiers who might have to fight on an alien world. Her Marines practiced in gravity simulators and environmental suits. They learned to use weapons in different atmospheric conditions. Most challenging of all, they learned to work alongside Corvani allies they had never met. "Remember," she told her troops, "these people have been fighting for their lives for months. They know their world better than we do. Listen to them, and they'll help keep you alive." The final preparations took 3 months. Every day brought new challenges. Ships broke down and had to be repaired. Weapons failed tests and had to be redesigned. Crew members got sick or injured and had to be replaced. But slowly, Task Force Liberator came together. Admiral Kyung-hee called a meeting of all ship commanders 1 week before departure. The conference room on the Indomitable was packed with captains and colonels from across human space. "In 7 days we will begin the longest military journey in human history," she began. "We're going to travel 47 light years to fight an enemy we've never seen before. Some of you will not come home." The room was completely silent. "But if we succeed, we will save an entire species from extinction, and we will send a message to every aggressive race in the galaxy. Humanity protects those who cannot protect themselves." Captain Ho-Li raised his hand. "What if the Corvani are already dead when we arrive?" "Then we make sure the Vorthak pay for what they've done," Admiral Kyung-hee replied. "And we make sure they don't do it to anyone else." Commander Na-Ri asked. The next question. "What if we're outnumbered?" Then we fight smarter, not harder. Human crews are better trained and more flexible than most aliens. We'll use that advantage." Young officer after young officer asked their questions. Each time, Admiral Kyung-hee gave them honest answers. She didn't promise easy victory or safe return. She promised only that they would do their duty and fight, for something worth fighting for. On the last night before departure, many crew members sent messages home to their families. Others visited the observation decks to look at Earth one more time. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Hana Kim had been transferred from Luna Station to serve as communications officer on the Indomitable. She would be the voice connecting the human fleet to the Corvani survivors. As she prepared her equipment, she thought about the first distress message she had received months ago. "We're coming," she whispered to herself. "Hold on just a little longer." The departure ceremony was simple. Secretary General Woo Jin Lee gave a brief speech from Earth, broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "You carry with you the hopes of all humanity," he said. "Not for conquest or glory, but for justice and compassion. Come home safely and bring peace with you." Fleet Admiral Kyung-hee stood on her bridge as the countdown began. Around her, 200 ships powered up their engines. The most powerful military force humanity had ever created was ready to travel further from home than any human had ever gone. "All ships report ready for jump," came the announcement. "Fleet order," Admiral Kyung-hee commanded. "Engage FTL drives. Destination Kepler 442 system. Let's go save some people." One by one, the ships of Task Force Liberator disappeared into the strange space between stars. Behind them, they left Earth and everything they knew. Ahead of them waited the unknown, and the chance to prove that humanity would answer when someone called for help. The journey to Corvani space would take 8 months. 8 months to prepare for the most important battle in human history. 8 months to hope they would arrive in time to save a dying species. 8 months to prove that the best part of humanity was worth defending. The meeting room in Geneva was full of the most powerful people on Earth. Secretary General Woo Jin Lee sat at the head of the table, looking at the faces of generals, admirals, and government officials from every nation. The air was thick with tension. Admiral Tae Choi stood at the front of the room, a holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system behind him. He had just finished playing the Corvani distress messages for the Council. Some people looked moved by what they heard. Others looked worried or angry. General Bo Kim was the first to speak. He was a large man with a loud voice and strong opinions. "This is not our problem," he said firmly. "We have enough troubles on Earth and in our own solar system. Why should we risk human lives for aliens we've never met?" "Because it's the right thing to do," replied Defense Minister Yoon Seo. She was a calm woman who chose her words carefully. "We're talking about genocide. An entire species is being wiped out." "We don't know that for sure," General Bo Kim argued. "Beck, all we have are some radio messages. For all we know, this could be a trap. Maybe these Vorthak are testing us to see how we'll react." Captain Jun Yu stood up from his seat. He commanded the exploration ship Harmony, and had spent years mapping the space between Earth and other star systems. "It's not a trap," he said. "My ship has been tracking energy signatures in that region for months. The weapon patterns match what the Corvani described. There's a real war happening out there, and one side is losing badly." Dr. Mi Young had been quiet until now. She was a small, elderly woman who had spent her life studying how different cultures interact with each other. When she spoke, everyone listened. "I've studied the Corvani language patterns and cultural references in their messages," she said. "These are a genuinely peaceful people. They have no words for military ranks or weapon types in their language. They're asking for help in the same way a child would ask an adult for protection. That's exactly why we shouldn't get involved," General Bo Kim said louder. "If they can't defend themselves, what makes you think we can defend them? We'll just be throwing our people away for nothing." Secretary General Woo Jin Lee raised his hand for silence. The room became quiet. "Admiral Choi, what would a military response look like?" Admiral Tae Choi changed the display to show Earth's naval forces. "We would need to send at least 200 ships to have a chance against the Vorthak fleet. The journey would take 8 months each way. We're talking about the largest military operation in human history. The cost would be enormous, said Finance Minister Kang Ho. We'd have to pull resources from every colony and defense station. Earth would be vulnerable while our fleet is away. Earth is already vulnerable, Captain Jun Yu said. The Vorthak have conquered 4 star systems that we know of. They're expanding toward our region of space. If we don't stop them now, we'll have to fight them later when they're even stronger. General Bo Kim slammed his hand on the table. You're all acting like we're some kind of galactic police force. We have 1 planet and a few colonies. These aliens have been traveling between stars for who knows how long. What makes you think we can succeed where others have failed? Because we're human, said a new voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look. Commander Na-Ri had just entered the meeting. She was young for her rank, but she had earned her position by being the best fighter pilot in the human fleet. Her face was serious as she walked to the front of the room. I've been studying the tactical data from the Corvani messages, she continued. The Vorthak fight like bullies. They pick on peaceful species who can't fight back, but they've never faced anyone who hits back hard. And you think we should be the ones to teach them that lesson? General Bo Kim asked with sarcasm in his voice. Yes, Commander Na-Ri said simply. Because if we don't, who will? The room erupted in arguments. Some people agreed with Na-Ri and thought humanity should help the Corvani. Others supported General Bo Kim and wanted to focus on Earth's safety. The debate went on for hours. Secretary General Wu Jin Lee called for a break. During the recess, small groups formed around the room. People discussed the situation in quiet. Voices. Defense Minister Yoon Seo approached Admiral Tae Choi. What do you really think our chances would be? Honestly, I don't know, the Admiral replied. We've never fought anyone like the Vorthak before. But our ships are fast and our weapons are powerful. More importantly, our people know how to adapt and improvise. That might give us an advantage. What about the Corvani? Can they help us at all? Not in a direct fight, Admiral Tae Choi said. But they know their own system better than anyone. And they have a good understanding of Vorthak tactics by now. They could provide intelligence. When the meeting resumed, Secretary General Wu Jin Lee asked each person to give their final position. One by one, they went around the table. General Bo Kim repeated his opposition. This is too risky. We should focus on defending Earth. Finance Minister Kang Ho worried about the cost. We don't have the resources for this kind of operation. Captain Jun Yu strongly supported intervention. The Vorthak are a threat to all free species. We have to stop them. Dr. Mi Young spoke about moral duty. If we ignore this, we become the kind of species that lets others suffer when we could help. Commander Na-Ri talked about military necessity. The Vorthak will come for us eventually. Better to fight them now on our terms. Defense Minister Yoon Seo was the last to speak before the Secretary General. This decision will define what kind of species humanity becomes, she said. Are we the kind of people who hear a cry for help and turn away? Or are we the kind who answer the call even when it's difficult? Secretary General Wu Jin Lee looked around the room one final time. Then he stood up. I've heard all the arguments, he said. Yes, this is risky. Yes, it will cost us resources and lives. But I keep thinking about something Dr. Mi Young said. We're being asked to help in the same way a child asks an adult for protection. He paused and looked directly at General Bo. Kim, adults don't ignore children in danger just because helping them is inconvenient. The vote was close. 15 in favor of military intervention, 12 opposed. Operation Distant Thunder was approved by the narrowest possible margin. As the meeting ended, Admiral Tae Choi felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In a few hours, he would begin preparing the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. They would travel further from Earth than any human had gone before, to fight an enemy they had never seen, for people they had never met. General Bo Kim approached him as the room emptied. I hope you're right about this, he said quietly. Because if you're wrong, you might be sending humanity's finest warriors to their deaths. I hope I'm right too, Admiral Tae Choi replied. But I know one thing for certain. We can't let fear stop us from doing what's right. That night, the first orders went out to military bases across human space. Ships that had been patrolling peaceful trade routes were recalled for combat duty. Weapons that had only been tested were loaded onto warships. Men and women who had joined the military to explore space prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. And in the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna, Hana Kim continued to listen for any sign that the Corvani were still alive, still fighting, still hoping that someone had heard their call for help. The red lights on the console blinked in a pattern Hana Kim had never seen before. She leaned closer to her workstation, adjusting her headset as the strange signals came through the deep space array. It was 3 in the morning on Luna Station, and she was the only person awake in the communications center. The signal was weak and broken. Static filled most of it, but underneath the noise, something else was trying to get through. Hana turned up the volume and listened carefully. The pattern was too organized to be random. Someone or something was trying to talk. She called her supervisor. "Day Park, you need to get down here right now." Day arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing his sleeping clothes. He was the best signal analyst on Luna Station, and Hana knew if anyone could figure this out, it would be him. He sat down at the console next to her and put on his own headset. "How long has this been coming through?" he asked. "About an hour. It's getting stronger, but it's still mostly noise." Day worked his magic on the computer, filtering out the static and background radiation. Slowly, the signal became clearer. What they heard next changed everything. The voice was not human. It spoke in sounds that no human throat could make, but somehow, buried in the alien speech, there were mathematical patterns, numbers that both species could understand. The voice repeated the same message over and over. "This is not random," Day said quietly. "Someone is teaching us their language." They worked through the night, using the mathematical patterns to build a translation program. By morning, they had decoded enough to understand the basic meaning of the message. When they finally heard it in translated form, both of them sat in shocked silence. The message was a cry for help. Admiral Tae Choi arrived at Luna Station 12 hours later. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. Hana had never met anyone so important before, and she felt nervous as she explained what they had found. "Play it again," the Admiral said. The translated voice came through the speakers, clear now after hours of work. "This is the Corvani Council of Kepler 442. We send this message to any who can hear us. Our world is dying. The Vorthak have come with their warships. They destroy our crystal gardens and take our people as slaves. We have no weapons to fight them. We are a peaceful people. We have lived in harmony for thousands of years, but the Vorthak do not care. They want our crystals. They say our ancestors mean nothing to them. Please, if anyone hears this message, help us. We do not have much time. The Vorthak will finish their work soon. This may be our last transmission." The message repeated the same plea over and over. Admiral Tae Choi listened to it 3 times before speaking. "Where is this coming from?" "Kepler 442, Hana replied. "It's a star system about 47 light-years from Earth. We've known about the planets there for centuries, but we never detected any signs of life before." "And these Vorthak?" Day pulled up his research on the main screen. "We've been tracking unusual energy signatures in that region for the past 2 years. High-powered weapons fire and ship movements. We thought it might be solar activity, but now we know better." The Admiral studied the data. "How sure are you that this message is real?" "I called in Dr. Ria Han from the Xenobiology Department," Day said. "She's been studying the language patterns and the technical details in the message. She says it's definitely from a non-human intelligence." Dr. Ria Han entered the room as if summoned by her name. She was a small woman with bright eyes who had spent her whole career hoping to find proof of alien life. Now that she had found it, she looked both excited and worried. "The message is authentic," she said without waiting for questions. "The Corvani describe their biology in ways that no human could fake. They're silicon-based life forms, living in crystalline structures that store their memories and history. What the Vorthak are doing is not just murder, it's the destruction of an entire culture." "What about these Vorthak?" Admiral Tae Choi asked. "Based on the energy signatures we've detected, they're highly advanced and very aggressive. They seem to specialize in conquering other species. The Corvani mentioned that 3 other worlds have already fallen to them. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his communication device and made a call. "This is Admiral Tae Choi. I need an emergency meeting with the UN Military Council. We have a situation." Over the next week, more messages arrived from the Corvani system. Each one was weaker than the last. The aliens described their situation in growing desperation. The Vorthak had landed on their world and were using powerful machines to harvest the crystal forests. Millions of Corvani had been killed or captured. Hana found herself staying late every night listening to the messages and working with Day to improve their translations. She felt a connection to these distant aliens. Their pain came through, clearly in every transmission. "Why doesn't someone help them?" she asked Day one evening. "Help them how? They're 47 light-years away. Even our fastest ships would take months to get there. And what could we do against an enemy that conquered their entire world in weeks?" But Hana couldn't stop thinking about the voices in the messages. The Corvani sounded like people talking about their children and grandparents. They described the crystal gardens as places where they learned from their ancestors' stored memories. The Vorthak were not just destroying a planet, they were destroying a living library of an entire civilization. The latest message was different from the others. The voice was weaker, and the background was filled with the sounds of weapons fire and explosions. "This may be our final transmission," the Corvani speaker said. "The Vorthak have found our last safe shelter. We go now to the deep caves where our oldest ancestors rest. If we must die, we will die protecting what remains of our people's memory. To whoever receives this message, remember that the Corvani existed. Remember that we loved our world and each other. Beware the Vorthak. They will not stop with us." After that message, there was silence. Admiral Tae Choi returned to Luna Station the next day. He looked older and more tired than before. "The UN Council is meeting about your discovery," he told Hana and Day. "There are people who think we should ignore this and focus on our own problems. Others think we should try to help." "What do you think?" Hana asked. The Admiral looked out through the station's window at the Earth below. "I think that message traveled 47 light-years to reach us for a reason. The Corvani had no way of knowing if anyone would hear them, but they sent it anyway. That takes courage." "But what can we do?" Day asked. "We've never fought an interstellar war before." "No," Admiral Tae Choi agreed. "But we've never had a good reason to start one before either." He turned back to them. "Keep monitoring the signals from that system. If there's even a small chance some Corvani are still alive, we need to know about it." As the Admiral left, Hana looked at her console one more time. The signals from Kepler 442 were still silent, but she refused to give up hope. Somewhere out there, an entire species was fighting for survival. And now humanity knew about it. The question was, what would humanity do with that knowledge? That night, Hana lay in her small room on Luna Station, staring out at the stars. One of those points of light was the Kepler 442 system. She wondered if any Corvani were still alive, hiding in their caves, hoping that their message had reached someone who cared. She made a promise to herself and to them. She would not let their voices be forgotten. 3 months after the battle for Corvani space, the galaxy was a different place. Admiral Kyung-hee stood in the temporary command center that had been built on the Corvani homeworld. Through the windows she could see human and Corvani workers, rebuilding the crystal gardens together. The sight still amazed her. The Corvani had turned out to be remarkable people. Despite losing most of their population and seeing their world devastated, they had not fallen into despair. Instead, they worked tirelessly to restore what had been destroyed. "The final casualty report, Admiral," said her aide, Lieutenant Park. Kyung-hee took the datapad and read it quietly. 47 ships lost. 12,307 human personnel killed in action. Among the dead was Admiral Tae Choi, the man who had first argued for this mission. But they had saved an entire species. Over 10,000 Corvani had survived the Vorthak occupation. It wasn't many compared to their original population of millions, but it was enough to rebuild their civilization. "Admiral," came a voice from the doorway. Kyung-hee turned to see crystal singer Velhar, the leader of the surviving Corvani. The alien's crystal-like body caught the light and threw it back in beautiful patterns. When Velhar spoke, it sounded like music. "The council has finished its deliberations," Velhar said in careful English. "We wish to make a formal proposal to your government." "What kind of proposal?" "A mutual defense alliance," Velhar replied. "Your people saved us when we could not save ourselves. We wish to stand with you against future threats." This was exactly what Admiral Kyung-hee had hoped to hear. The Corvani might not be warriors, but their technology was incredibly advanced. Their crystal-based computers could process information faster than any human system. Their knowledge of energy manipulation could revolutionize human science. "I'll send your proposal to Earth immediately," she said. "I think they'll be very interested." Meanwhile, on Earth, the successful mission had transformed humanity's place in the galaxy. Other alien species that had been hiding from the Vorthak began making contact. They wanted to meet the species that had dared to fight the galaxy's greatest bullies. Secretary General Woo Jin Lee found himself busier than ever, meeting with ambassadors from a dozen different worlds. Each species had its own story of Vorthak aggression. Each one was grateful that someone had finally stood up to the Empire. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Mi Young told him during one of their planning meetings. "We're being contacted by civilizations we never knew existed. Some of them have technology far beyond ours, and they're all afraid of the same thing," Woo Jin Lee replied. The Vorthak weren't just conquering the Corvani. They were working their way through the galaxy, one species at a time. The Secretary General had made an important decision. He Taegyur was creating a new organization, the Galactic Protection Initiative. Its mission would be to coordinate defense against aggressive species like the Vorthak. Diplomat Young Soo had been chosen to lead this new organization. He was already working with representatives from 6 different species to establish protocols for mutual aid and defense. "It's remarkable," he told his staff. "These species have been hiding from the Vorthak for decades. Now they want to work together to make sure nothing like this happens again." Back on Luna Station, Hana Kim had been promoted to Director of Deep Space Monitoring. Her job now was to listen for distress signals from across the galaxy. She had a team of 50 people working under her, using the most advanced communication equipment humanity had ever built, and they were not working alone. Crystal singer Velhar had sent 12 young Corvani to help with the monitoring project. Their natural ability to process complex signals made them incredibly valuable partners. "New transmission coming in," announced one of her technicians. "It's from the Rigel system." Hana listened to the message as it was translated. Another species was calling for help. The Zalani, a peaceful aquatic people, were being attacked by raiders who wanted to steal their underwater cities. "Range?" Hana asked. 23 light years, came the reply. Hana smiled. That was much closer than the Corvani system had been, and this time, humanity wouldn't be going alone. "Patch me through to Admiral Kyung-hee," she ordered. Within hours, plans were being made for humanity's second interstellar rescue mission. This time, they would be accompanied by Corvani crystal ships that could travel even faster than human vessels. The news media on Earth couldn't get enough of humanity's new role as galactic protectors. Captain Ho Lee, who had survived his ship's destruction during the battle, had become a hero. Millions of people watched his interviews about fighting in space, but the most popular figure was Colonel In-hai, who had led the ground mission to save the Corvani survivors. She had been promoted to general and was now training a new type of soldier, Marines who specialized in fighting alongside alien allies. "The galaxy is bigger than we ever imagined," she told a gathering of military cadets. "There are hundreds of species out there, each with their own cultures and abilities. Our job is to make sure the peaceful ones can live without fear." Engineer Gil Nam had received a new assignment that excited him more than anything he had ever done. He was working with Corvani scientists to combine human and alien technology. The results were incredible. Weapons that were twice as powerful as anything humanity had built before, but which could be set to disable rather than destroy. Dr. So Young had opened the first interspecies medical center on Earth. Doctors from year. 3 different worlds worked there, learning to treat patients from species they had never seen before. Her research into Corvani healing methods was revolutionizing human medicine. But perhaps the most important change was in how humans saw themselves. Commander Nari, now an admiral, put it best during a speech to new pilot recruits. 6 months ago, we were just one species among many, trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Today, we're the people other species call when they need help. That's not because we're the strongest or the smartest. It's because we're the ones who answer when someone calls. The transformation was visible everywhere. Schools on Earth began teaching alien languages. Universities offered courses in xenobiology and interspecies relations. Children played games where they pretended to rescue alien civilizations. And in the deep space monitoring stations scattered across human territory, people like Hana Kim listened to the void, waiting for the next call for help. They didn't have to wait long. Every week brought new messages from species in trouble. Pirates attacking trade routes, aggressive empires threatening peaceful worlds, natural disasters requiring evacuation assistance. Each time, humanity responded, sometimes with warships, sometimes with medical aid, sometimes with engineering expertise, always with the same message: you are not alone. The Vorthak Empire, meanwhile, was in chaos. Their defeat at Corvani Space had shattered their reputation for invincibility. Subject species began rebelling. Other aggressive powers challenged their territory. War Commander Thekvar was executed by his own people for the humiliating loss. Good, Admiral Kyung-hee said when she heard the news. Maybe that will make other bullies think twice. A year after the first Corvani distress call, Secretary General Woo Jin Lee stood before the United Nations General Assembly to give his annual report. But this time, he was not just addressing humans. In the audience were representatives from 16 different species, the founding members of the Galactic Protection Initiative. 1 year ago, a message traveled 47 light-years through space, he began. It was a cry for help from people we had never met, facing an enemy we had never seen. Today, that message has become something much larger, a promise that no peaceful species will face extinction alone. In the audience, crystal singer Velhar glowed with soft blue light, the Corvani expression of happiness. Next to Velhar sat Ambassador Torikwan of the Zilani, whose people had been saved by the second human rescue mission. Across the aisle, 3 representatives of the Keth Collective nodded their approval with movements that looked like a dance. The galaxy is vast, Secretary General Woo Jin Lee continued, but it is also connected. What happens to one species affects us all. When we heard the Corvani call for help, we chose to answer with warships. Today, I am proud to say that we answer every call, not just with weapons, but with medicine, with technology, with friendship. The speech was broadcast across human space and to every member species of the new alliance. On distant worlds, beings that had never seen a human listened to the words and felt something they had not felt in years: hope. And in the deep space monitoring station that had started it all, Hana Kim sat at her console, listening to the endless chatter of a galaxy learning to work together. Distress calls still came through regularly, but they were answered just as regularly. The age of isolated suffering was ending. She thought about that first weak signal she had detected so many months ago. The Corvani had reached out desperately into the void, not knowing if anyone would hear, not expecting anyone to care enough, to travel impossible distances to help. They had been wrong. Someone had heard. Someone had cared. And now, because of that first brave message, and humanity's response to it, the galaxy was becoming a place where calling for help actually meant something. The SOS had reached Earth, and humanity had answered with Task Force Liberator dropped out of FTL space at the edge of the Corvani system. What they saw made even the most experienced officers gasp in shock. The beautiful crystal world the Corvani had described in their messages was gone. In its place was a scarred, broken planet covered with massive mining machines. The crystal forests that had stored thousands of years of Corvani history were being ground into dust and loaded onto transport ships. "My God," whispered Admiral Kyung-hee. What have they done? On the main display, the Vorthak fleet came into view. 358 warships of various sizes filled the space around the planet. They moved in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numbers. But there was something the Vorthak didn't know. They had never faced humans before. All ships, battle stations, Admiral Kyung-hee commanded. Commence Operation Lightning. Strike. The plan was simple but dangerous. Captain Ho Lee would lead the first wave in a direct assault on the Vorthak command ships. While the enemy focused on this attack, Commander Nari's fighters would slip around behind them and hit their supply vessels. Meanwhile, Colonel In-hai's Marines would land on the planet to find and rescue any surviving Corvani. First wave, move out, Admiral Kyung-hee ordered. Captain Ho Lee led 30 destroyers straight toward the center of the Vorthak fleet. His ship, Storm's Edge, fired the first shots of humanity's first interstellar war. The experimental plasma torpedoes Gilnam had designed struck the shields of a Vorthak battleship. The shields held, but barely. The Vorthak were caught completely off guard. They had not detected the human fleet's arrival because their sensors were focused on the planet below. By the time they realized they were under attack, Captain Ho Lee's ships were already among them. "Human vessels," came a transmission in accented English. "This is War Commander Thekvar. You have entered Vorthak territory. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Admiral Kyung-hee opened the communication channel. "This is Fleet Admiral Kyung, he of the Earth Defense Force. You are the ones who will surrender. Release the Corvani prisoners and withdraw from this system." Thekvar's laugh was like metal scraping against stone. "Foolish humans. You are outnumbered 3-1. Your small fleet cannot defeat the might of the Vorthak Empire. We'll see about that," Admiral Kyung-hee replied, and cut the transmission. The space battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. Vorthak ships were larger and more heavily armored than human vessels, but they were also slower and less maneuverable. Captain Ho Lee's destroyers danced between the enemy battleships, firing plasma torpedoes at point-blank range. Commander Nari launched her fighters from 3 different carrier ships. 200 small, fast human fighters swarmed through the Vorthak fleet like angry insects. They targeted engine systems and weapon arrays, trying to disable rather than destroy. "Remember," Nari told her pilots, "we're not here to commit genocide, we're here to stop one." The Vorthak fought back with massive energy beams that could vaporize a human destroyer in one shot, but their weapons were designed for large, slow targets. The quick, agile human ships were much harder to hit. Engineer Gil Nam watched his weapons perform better than he had hoped. The plasma torpedoes punched through Vorthak's shields like they weren't there. The particle beam weapons disabled enemy ships without destroying them completely, just as he had designed them to do. But the battle was far from won. The Vorthak had more ships, and they were learning to adapt to human tactics. 3 human destroyers were destroyed in the first hour of fighting. 2 fighter squadrons were wiped out by Vorthak interceptors. On the planet below, Colonel In-hai led the first human soldiers ever to fight on an alien world. Her Marines landed in drop pods near the coordinates the Corvani had provided, the entrance to the deep caves where the survivors were hiding. What they found was a war zone. Vorthak ground forces had surrounded the cave entrances with heavy weapons and energy barriers. They were trying to force the last Corvani out of their hiding places. "Team 1, take the left flank," Colonel In-hai ordered. "Team 2, suppress those energy weapons. Team 3, find a way into those caves." The Marines moved with precision and courage. They had trained for months to fight in alien conditions, and their preparation paid off. Human weapons were more accurate than Vorthak guns. Human soldiers were better at working together as a team. But the most important moment came when they finally made contact with the Corvani survivors. The aliens were even more beautiful than the humans had imagined. Their crystal-like bodies reflected light in amazing patterns. But they were also clearly exhausted and terrified. They had been hiding in the caves for weeks, listening to their world being destroyed above them. You are the humans," said one of the Corvani in broken English. You came. We did not dare to hope. We're here to get you out, Colonel in High replied. Can you help us fight the Vorthak? We are not warriors, the Corvani said sadly. But we know every cave and tunnel in this mountain. We can show you paths the Vorthak do not know about. Working together, the humans and Corvani began a guerrilla war against the Vorthak ground forces. The aliens guided human soldiers through hidden passages that led behind enemy lines. The Marines used their superior weapons and tactics to hit the Vorthak where they didn't expect it. In space, the battle was reaching its climax. War Commander Tekvar had finally organized his fleet into an effective formation. The Vorthak ships formed a giant sphere with the human fleet trapped inside. Now you will see the price of opposing the Vorthak Empire, Tekvar transmitted. But Admiral Kyung-hee had been waiting for this moment. She had deliberately allowed her fleet to be surrounded. All ships, execute Pattern Omega, she commanded. What happened next would be remembered as one of the greatest tactical maneuvers in military history. The human fleet suddenly split into 12 smaller groups and attacked in all directions at once. Each group targeted a different section of the Vorthak sphere. The Vorthak had expected the humans to fight like they did, in large, organized formations. They were not prepared for the chaotic, multi-directional assault that followed. Captain Ho-Lee led his group straight at Tekvar's command ship. This is for the Corvani, he shouted as Storm's Edge fired every weapon it had. The command ship's shields failed under the concentrated fire. Plasma torpedoes punched through its armor. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull, but Tekvar was not finished. His ship turned its massive main gun toward Storm's Edge. "Captain," shouted his weapons officer. "He's got us targeted." "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Ho-Lee ordered. The Storm's Edge tried to turn away, but the Vorthak energy beam was too fast. It struck the human destroyer's engine section. Explosions rocked the ship as power systems failed. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, came the damage report. Engines offline, we're dead in space. But Captain Ho-Lee's sacrifice had given the rest of the human fleet the opening they needed. Commander Na-Ri's fighters swarmed over the damaged Vorthak command ship. Admiral Kyung-hee herself led the heavy cruisers in the final assault. "This is Admiral Kyung-hee to War Commander Tekvar," she transmitted as human ships surrounded his crippled vessel. "Your ship is disabled. Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and your people will be treated with dignity." For a long moment, there was silence. Then Tekvar's voice came through the communication system, filled with shock and disbelief. "This is impossible. You are only humans. How did you defeat the Vorthak Empire?" "Because we're fighting for something worth dying for," Admiral Kyung-hee replied. "And you're just fighting for conquest." The space battle was over. Of the 358 Vorthak ships, over 200 had been destroyed or disabled. The rest were retreating toward the edge of the system. On the planet below, the Vorthak ground forces surrendered when they learned their fleet had been defeated. Colonel in High and her Marines had successfully rescued over 10,000 Corvani survivors from the caves. But the victory had come at a cost. 47 human ships had been destroyed. Captain Ho-Lee was among the 12,000 human casualties. Admiral Tae Choi, who had first heard the Corvani distress call, died when his ship exploded during the final assault on the Vorthak command vessel. As the battle ended, Admiral Kyung-hee stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the scarred world below. The Corvani would need years to rebuild what the Vorthak had destroyed, but they were alive, and they were free. And across the galaxy, other species would learn that there was a new power among the stars, a species that would travel 47 light years to answer a cry for help from strangers. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy with warships and courage. The age of human space would never be the same.